Hello. So today I picked 5 books off my shelves that I want to talk to you about. And it's because I've seen a couple of videos going around where people are talking about the darkest books they've ever read, talking about dark books. And I read a lot of horror, which is what a lot of these people are talking about when they're talking about dark books. Um, and looking at this list, I would say that I suppose you could construe 3 of these as horror novels. When I'm looking at them, I really only see one of them as a straight up horror novel. The other two are like, I can see where you're coming from. I wouldn't call them a horror novel. But I want to talk to you about 5 of the darkest books I've ever read. And for me, a dark book, it's probably, I mean, a horror novel. Horror has a predisposition to darkness, but I do feel like for a book to be considered a dark book, for me, at the very least, it's really just got to feel hopeless in a lot of ways. And nobody does hopeless better than the French realists. So the first book that I do want to mention is Germinal by Emile Zola. So Germinal is the story of a miners' strike in, I believe, 1800s France, and the repercussions of that, where a lot of people are dying and a lot of people are hurt, and it is the people who have the money don't really see a point in caring about any of that. And Zola is well known for the cycle, the series that this book is a part of, but mostly I believe Germinal is his most popular book. It's his most well-known book. I do think that is for a reason. Germinal is very dark and it's very depressing, but it's very good. I've read it twice. I read it in French, I read it in English, and it does show a lot of societal things. I don't know, but I would say this is one of the darkest books I've ever read. All right, after Zola, I do want to talk, I don't know why, but all of my dark books were in the first 3 letters of the alphabet. So the next one, I'm actually going to talk about a Robert Cormier novel, and that is We All Fall Down. So Robert Cormier is probably most popular for his books such as The Chocolate War, I Am the Cheese, neither of which are exactly, bundles of joy. But We All Fall Down is harrowing in a lot of ways. We All Fall Down is a story of, it's a love story between these 2 people. There's this girl who one day her and her parents come home and her house has been broken into and destroyed, and her sister, who got home earlier, was sexually assaulted and pushed down the stairs. Now she's in a coma. And now this girl, she meets this boy and they start to fall in love. But the boy is one of the people who broke into her house. And it's about that. And it's very sad. And the last page of this book is what really solidifies it for me. And so I'm going to read the last page to you. It's page 193 in this hardcover edition. She paused, half turned toward him, not saying anything, waiting. His mind cleared, and he found himself speaking words he had rehearsed countless times in his head, words to make her remember the good times. It was beautiful there for a while, wasn't it, Jane? He looked as if he was about to cry. She thought of the trashing, and Karen in a coma all that time, and Mickey Looney dead, and her father and mother and Artie, and these yellow stains under the paint in her bedroom. Was it? She said, suddenly sorry for him, so sorry. As pity moved into that hole inside her, she discovered how distant pity was from hate, how very far it was from love. She stepped on the escalator and slowly ascended, not looking back, leaving him down below. I didn't mention that there is also a mystery that there's an Avenger that's like trying to like solve these crimes. But for me, that's like the least important part of the book. But no, We All Fall Down. Which is great. After that, this is the most recent book I've read. I did read this in 2025. I believe I've wholehearted belief that this is going to be on one of my favorite books of the year, and that is The Laws of the Skies by Grégoire Courtois. Nobody's depressing like the French, I suppose, and this is one of the books where I could see where somebody make an argument for being a horror novel, but I don't quite agree with that. The Laws of the Skies is one of those books that gets compared to Lord of the Flies, and I very much could have pulled Lord of the Flies. I considered it. I looked at my copies of Lord of the Flies, but The Laws of the Skies is about a group of French 6-year-olds who are going into an overnight camping trip with their teacher and a couple of parent chaperones. Unfortunately, one of the parent chaperones gets sick, and so the other one is heading back to the road to call for her husband to come pick her up, where the teacher is left with all these 6-year-olds. And you wouldn't think so this would be a problem, you know, like she's gonna be back soon. It's not that big of a deal. Unfortunately, one of the 6-year-olds, they got a Roger. You know, they always got a Roger when there's a story like this. And all these kids die in horrible ways. And they let you know that. On the very bottom of page 7 it says, there you have it, the children were on their way, they would never return. Still, I didn't really expect Mr. Courtois to have the balls to do what he did in this book. This book was intense, it was insane. It's not for the faint of heart. I wouldn't say. I do think that this is a book where he really went for it, and is definitely very dark, and very sad. Like, you know, like you've read page 7s, but so you know what's gonna happen, but you still want them to make it. You still want them to live. They don't, so there's that. All right, the next one is the one that I will concede is a horror novel, and that is Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. I love Exquisite Corpse ruined cannibalism books for me entirely, forever. But Exquisite Corpse is kind of a two-parter here. We start out, we meet this man who has been in prison because he's basically Dennis Nilsen, and he has faked his own death so that they will take him out, and then he ends up busting out, and he decides to come over to America, where he meets up with basically Jeffrey Dahmer, who has his eye on this one, like, 19-year-old, like, Filipino kid who he thinks is real cute. But what really hits me in this one, other than there's a part where somebody eats meat out of Mr. Dahmer. It's not actually Jeffrey Dahmer, but, like, essentially Poppy Z. Bright wrote Dennis Nilsen Jeffrey Dahmer fanfiction. That's kind of what it is. Where the I read it a while ago. What's his name? Okay, I'll look at his name. Byrne. Jay Byrne. Somebody is digging in Jay Byrne's fridge, and he eats mystery meat, and you as the reader know what that mystery meat is, and the character never realizes it. But other than that, what really hits me in this one is that the I guess he's not Filipino, he's Vietnamese American. The Vietnamese American kid, trans ex-boyfriend, has a radio show, and trans ex-boyfriend is, like, dying of AIDS, and it is very sad. And that is really what got me the most in this book. That is what I feel like some of the darkest stuff in this book comes from. So Exquisite Corpse. And the last one, I feel the last one is a little bit of, like, I don't know, this isn't, you kind of had to be there. I don't know, this is a book that traumatized my mother in the 80s and 90s, and I feel like it is a book that traumatized a lot of people's mothers in the 80s and 90s. And I have read it a couple times. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy it. I think it's a very interesting book. And that is Flowers in the Attic by B.C. Andrews. Flowers in the Attic is very infamous. Like, it's a very infamous novel. It is about the Dollinger family. And we open up with this book. This is the first book in the series. We open up, and we learn about this girl, and she's living this perfect life. She's got an older brother, she's got a younger brother, younger sister. Her parents are beautiful and perfect, and everything's wonderful. And then her father dies. And turns out that they don't have any money. So mom's like, we're gonna move in with my parents, but they don't know you exist, and they can't. My father doesn't know you exist. He can't know you exist, because he did not like my husband. And so she hides him up in the attic, and they have to follow really draconian rules. And the real horror in this, I mean, obviously, yes, there's the whole incest thing, and that is fairly, I mean, in any V.C. Andrews book, you're gonna find the incest thing, and it pops up in a couple different ways here. But what really gets me this one, and I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's the arsenic donuts, and that whole concept there, and just everything that going on with the mother. That's what gets me. That's what I think is the darkest about this book. But no. This was really a very kind of, like, quick put together list, but yes, and they certainly weren't in any order. I think if I had to say which one's dark, it's probably Laws of the Skies, but I just kind of did it over. I had the stack in. But no, this is my response to the whole dark books conversation. This is what I think when I think about dark books. There's got to be some kind of element of hopelessness in it. Yeah, I suppose in Flowers in the Attic, 3 out of the 4 do make it out of the attic. Spoilers, I guess. But it's still fairly hopeless, you know, and it includes the corpse. It's entirely hopeless. Laws of the Skies, it's hopeless. Germinal is hopeless. We all fall down. It's over, you know, like, I don't know. But that is my response to the whole dark books conversation. That's everything. Like I said, like, I could have dug up some nonfiction, particularly like West Memphis 3 stuff. I could have dug up some more horror. There's some other books that compared to Chocolate War and Lord of the Flies that I could have dug up. I could have pulled out Brutal Youth. But this is kind of what I settled on. those are 5 books that I do consider when I think of dark books. It's this kind of stuff. You know, it's not just blood and guts. It's got to have a hopeless element to it as well.